trade is propagated as an important means to economic growth and development. The essential aim of conducting foreign trade is to stimulate the economic activity and not just to earn foreign exchange. We need to develop a foreign trade policy as an instrument to promote economic growth along the desired lines. Along with an increase in the exports, it is important to facilitate imports as well, which are required to fuel the growth of our economy. With a view to maximize the contribution of foreign trade, the policies should be made in such a manner that they are coherent and consistent with the other economic policies in the country. Thus, while assimilating the ongoing practice of announcing an annual EXIM policy, Government of India took a unified approach to the developmental requirements of foreign trade. These policies basically lay down the rules and also reform them for carrying out the country's exports and imports. It was in 2004 that the then Commerce Minister, Mr. Kamal Nath, decided that it would be more appropriate to call it foreign trade policy because apart from determining the general guidelines relating to a country's exports and imports, it also accommodates the special focus on initiatives such as duty exemption schemes, and it helps our exports to compete at the global level. Foreign trade policies have a regime for 5 years which is revised annually. The revision of policy is required because trade is a dynamic condition and trade takes place in a global environment which is dynamic. Since 2004 in India, we have developed 3 foreign trade policies, 2004 to 9, then 9 to 14 and 15 to 2020, which is a prospective policy. In this module, we shall be studying all the 3 policies in detail. Now, after studying this module, you shall be able to understand the need to shift from EXIM policy to foreign trade policy in 2004. Know about different aspects of different policies announced from time to time. Analyze the impact of new policies on our foreign trade. Now, let us discuss about the first policy, that is from 2004 to 2009. In 2004, the UPA government, the then UPA government, adopted the National Foreign Trade Policy or NFTP 2004 to 2009 as a tool of export promotion, replacing the earlier EXIM policy. The policy intended to encourage exports by enhancing their competitiveness in the global market. This was expected to generate employment and help in poverty alleviation. The objectives of the foreign trade policy of 2004 are the following. The ultimate aim of the NFTP 2004-9 was to generate employment. With this end in view, it identified 2 means: increase in the exports to GDP ratio and a larger emphasis on labor intensive export. In order to meet this objective, the goal or target was set in the sense that it was required that there be a doubling of India's contribution to global trade from 0.8% to 1.5% by the end of 2009. Accordingly, this would act as an effective instrument of growth by giving a push to employment, especially in the rural sector as well as in semi-urban areas. Now let us discuss the strategies. The key strategies which were followed by the NFTP was to unshackle the controls and create an environment of transparency. It emphasized on simplifying the procedural formalities and lowering down the transaction costs. To meet these objectives, it identified the special focus areas needed to be nurtured. This essentially means that the sectors with substantial export potential for employment and growth were identified in semi-urban and rural areas, and these were designated as the thrust sectors, and then specific strategies were worked out for the same, which are known as focus market schemes and focus product schemes. This involves reimbursement of duty payments up to 2.5% of the value of the FOB export value to counterbalance the high freight and the transportation cost to international markets. The threshold limit for the towns in which these focus areas were identified were classified as towns of export excellence, TEE, and these were brought, this was the limit, the threshold was brought down from rupees 1000 crores to rupees 250 crores. These selected towns basically had the potential for growth in exports. Thus, certain incentives were given to them. So, these towns were selected because they had the growth potential. Certain incentives were given to them in the form of financial assistance under the Market Access Initiative, MAI. This scheme and other schemes were floated, like the Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme, EPCG scheme. Then we had another strategy called Target Plus, a scheme to speed up the growth of exports called Target Plus was introduced. In this scheme, the incentives in terms of duty-free credit were given to the exporters if the value of their export exceeded the general target set for them. For example, if any exporter had set a target of exports of 20% more than the target, or had achieved a export of more than 20% of the target, then he would be eligible to receive a duty-free credit up to 5% of the FOB value of his incremental exports. Then we had another strategy called Vishesh Krishi Upaj Yojana. This scheme, known as the Special Agricultural Produce Scheme, was launched to boost the exports of fruits, vegetables, flowers and minor forest products. Export of these products qualified for the duty-free credit entitlement up to 5% of the FOB value of exports, and this entitlement could be utilized for the import of a variety of agricultural inputs. This means that exporters could import the inputs at a reduced rate. Then this would also help them in becoming more competitive. And then there was another scheme called Served from India scheme. This scheme was intended to create a unique and impressive brand served from India that could be recognized all over the world. The earlier schemes with the same motives were reformulated and revamped into this new scheme. Individual service providers who earn foreign exchange of at least rupees 5 lakhs were entitled and eligible for duty-free credit entitlement of 10% of the total foreign exchange earned by them. Hotels and restaurants came under this scheme and could avail of duty-free credit up to 20% and 5% respectively. They were allowed to use the entitlement for the import of food items. On the whole, the NFTP 2004-9 was able to address the issue of export promotion and through it also employment generation. As per WTO, our share of the world's merchandise trade went up from 0.83 in 2003 to 1.45 in 2008. Similarly, our share of world services rose from 2.8% in 2008 and it went up from just merely 1.4% in 2003. On the whole, during the 5-year period from 2004 to 2009, the exports experienced a robust growth process to reach the level of US dollars 1.68 billion in 2008-9, which increased from the earlier figure of just 63 billion in 2003-4. In regard to employment, there are studies which suggested that nearly 14 million jobs were created as a result of the augmented exports during the period 2004-9. However, the impact of NFTP was varied across different states and different products. While products such as grapes in Nashik and mangoes in Malda seem to have drawn substantial benefits, the spices in Orissa seem to have not benefited at all when not even one of them was included in the focused product schemes. One may argue that the formulation and implementation of the policy could not be carried out at the optimal level. Now let us consider the next policy, that is from 2009 to 14. Owing to the global financial crisis in 2009, almost all countries across the world were severely affected in different degrees. On the whole, the economic indicators like consumption, capital flows and trade had taken a hit. The IMF estimated that global trade declined by 11% in volume terms and WTO forecasted a decline of nearly about 9%. Though the adverse impact on India was not of the same magnitude as compared to the developed economies, but still it suffered on account of exports. This was mainly due to the contraction in demand in the foreign markets for Indian exports. It was indeed a Herculean task to formulate a foreign trade policy in such a grim economic situation. Thus, what was needed is that the strategy and policy instruments were to pursue a strategy that was such that it would catalyze the growth in exports. The main objectives of foreign trade policy of 2009 to 14 were the following: to arrest the reversal in the declining trend of exports, to double India's exports of goods and services by 2014, to double India's share in world merchandise by 2020, to simplify the application of procedures for availing the benefits. In general, the policy aimed at enhancing the potential to export, improving the export performance, encouraging foreign trade and earning foreign exchange. As India's exports were affected by global recession, FTP 2009-14 was of great importance. The decline in exports due to the closure of many export-oriented industries occurred, because of which in fact there was large-scale unemployment as well. The target for exports was set at 200 billion to be achieved by 2010-11, having an annual export growth of 15%. Coming back to the high growth path, and for the export growth, the target was 25% for the next 3 years, that is from 2011 up to 2014. In order to achieve these objectives, the government would follow a mix of policy measures including fiscal incentives, institutional changes and the diversification of export markets. What were the strategies in the second policy period? New markets were introduced under the focus market scheme. Total of 26 markets were added, 16 in Latin America and 10 in Asia, Oceania. Incentives under the focus market scheme were raised from 2.5% to 3%. New products were added under the incentive focus product scheme like engineering products, green technologies products and then electronic goods as well. The incentives under the focus product scheme were raised from 1.25% to 2%. Market linked focus product scheme was expanded by including a considerable number of products. These products included pharmaceuticals, textile fabrics, rubber products and certain iron and steel products. Benefits to these products were to be given if they were exported to the specifically selected 13 markets, and these are Argentina, Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, Brazil, Mexico, Ukraine, Vietnam, Cambodia, Australia and New Zealand. A common form was introduced to avail benefits under the focus market scheme, and the focus product scheme, product linked focus product scheme and the Vishesh Krishi Upaj Yojana. For all of these schemes there was a common form which was introduced. Higher financial allocation for the Market Development Assistance MDA and for Market Access Initiative MAI was also provided. New areas for towns of excellence, export excellence were recognized. These included Jaipur, Srinagar, Anantnag for handicrafts, Kanpur, Devas and Ambur for leather works, and for horticultural products other areas included were Malihabad for horticultural products. A tax holiday for export units was extended. The tax holiday for export units was extended by 1 year. Duty entitlement passbook scheme was also extended by 1 year. To insulate the small and medium scale exporters, the Directorate of Trade Remedy Measures was introduced. Export obligations on import of spares parts under the Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme had been reduced to 50% of the normal specific export obligation. It is also to be noted that the 17 textile products were included in the focus product scheme, and it was taken up as a welcome step by the textile industry, but by the end of 2014 it was felt that the benefits were limited. This was because the benefits of status holder and export promotion capital goods scheme was given only to those who did not take benefit under the technology upgradation fund scheme. But most of the textile units were covered under TUFS scheme and they were denied these benefits. This reflects the foreign trade policy, that the foreign trade policy should be examined in the light of the feedback given by the concerned export units. Undoubtedly, India took a number of measures within this whole period where there was severe global recession through interest subvention, reduction in taxes and tax holidays and so on. But the neighborhood countries have applied such measures at a much larger scale. The measures listed above are supplemented by a few more steps which are based on their feedbacks, by the feedbacks given by the specific industry associations and the Federation of Indian Export Organizations, FIEO. We know that the government cannot generate demand for exports, but it can certainly help exporters so that they can grab the orders and the opportunities by losing very little margins. Government can also emphasize upon banks to make loans and advances for the export sector. For instance, the Export Development Fund should be created with a corpus of equivalent to around 0.5% of the preceding year's exports. The post shipment credit, which is now available up to 180 days, can be extended up to 365 days to ease off the financial crunch, especially in a period when the effects of global financial crisis are still being felt. When the growth of exports is steadily improving on a monthly basis and has shifted away from negative growth rate to a positive one, then we may conclude that the stimulus package from the Government of India and Reserve Bank's policies should be continued for some more time. Dropping these practices should be a gradual process and should be in line with the recovery process at the global level. Thus, there should be a cautious removal of these special advantages. Now, we should discuss the third phase of foreign trade policy, that is from 2015 to 2020, which is a prospective policy. This policy was announced by the Commerce and Industry Minister on April 1st, 2015. This policy has been announced at a time when several other measures were also undertaken by the present government, such as Make in India and Digital India. The policy puts a great focus on improving the ease of doing business in India, with an emphasis on both manufacturing as well as the service sector. The policy describes the strategies related to the products and markets needed to promote trade, develop infrastructure, and enhance the overall system of trade. It also helps to enable India to counter the external challenges and keep up the pace in line with the global trading architecture. The target is to double India's share in the world trade by 2020 by rationalizing the provisions given for imports and exports, and also by creating a mechanism to resolve the complaints and disputes related to the trade, foreign trade. The highlights of this foreign trade policy 2015 to 20. Two new schemes have been introduced for merchandise and for the service sector. Merchandise Export from India scheme, MEIS. This is designed for the export of specific goods to specific markets. It subsumes the existing schemes, Focus Market Scheme, Market Linked Focus Product Scheme, and Focus Market Scheme. And the Focus Product Scheme. the Agri Infrastructure Incentive Script and the Vishesh Krishi Gram Upaj Yojana, all of these have been superseded, and now it also has a revised rate for the reward for specific notified export goods in selected markets. These rewards are given as a percentage of the FOB earnings, foreign exchange earnings. The Services Export from India scheme, SEIS, this scheme was available to the service providers who are located in India as against the existing scheme of Serve from India, which gives benefits to Indian service providers. So this is a subtle shift in the policy. In both the schemes, the duty credit scripts can be used for payment of customs and excise duty as well as service tax. There is also a welcome step and imperative is to boost the special economic zones and the benefits under the MEIS scheme and the SEIS scheme. These have been extended to units located in the special economic zones. In addition, there is a change in the status holder also. The method for calculating the export performance meant for recognition of status holder has been changed from Indian rupee to US dollar earnings. The export performance will now consider only 2 previous years against the earlier provision of 3 previous years under the old foreign trade policy. For the purpose of ease of doing business and trade facilitation, the following proposals are also made. Online procedure for uploading digital signatures in documents, creation of profile of importers and exporters so that the repeated submissions are eliminated and a permanent record is maintained. Online facility for terminal excise duty refunds has also been provided. In order to encourage the Make in India initiative, the export obligations have been reduced from 90% to 75% for domestic procurement under the Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme. There is a higher reward being given under the MEIS for the products which have high domestic content and for more value addition done in India. This will promote the domestic manufacturing industry. These flexibilities will encourage the exporters to enhance their productive capacities. Measures have been taken in defense and in the high-tech items also. Further, e-commerce, export of products like handlooms, books, footwear, toys and fashion garments through courier or by post offices would be able to get the benefits under MEIS scheme. These measures will provide employment in addition to capitalizing the India's strength in these areas. The transition to this new policy is quite smooth as the eligibility of usage of scripts and other conditions for export of goods or rendering of services would be governed by the earlier foreign trade policy. On the whole, we may appreciate the new foreign trade policy 2015-20 as it emphasizes on simplification and mergers of the existing initiatives. Now let us summarize what we have discussed in this module. India had started the foreign trade policy in 2004 and it was a more holistic and integrated approach. The first policy of 2004-9 focused on enhancing the competitiveness of Indian products in the world market, and the emphasis was on employment and poverty alleviation. The foreign trade policy of 2009-14 aimed at arresting the reversing of the trend because of the global financial crisis, and it targeted at doubling the exports of goods and services from India by 2014. It also had a target of doubling India's share in world merchandise trade by 2020. The foreign trade policy of 2015 to 20, which is a prospective policy, has exerted pressure on improving the ease of doing business within India, with a special stress on both manufacturing as well as service sector. The impact of these policies can be seen on the resilient growth of our foreign trade. Hence, one may conclude that the measures could be in pace with global recovery. The various stimuli given to exporters have indeed been successful in setting the growth rate of exports at a higher trajectory.